So
So
moved.
moved. Second,
Second.
all in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, so that is passed. And similarly, the video minutes from July 9th have been posted. So I do need a motion to approve those minutes as they're shown online right now.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, that passes too. So we'll move on to tonight's list. Linda, I want to start with you because I know you have the issue of allocations that you wanted to talk about. So let's
Yeah.
go with that. We'll go with that first.
So are you all seeing my Excel spreadsheet? No.
No, the
Okay.
agenda.
Right now, the
Okay.
agenda is what's going. Yeah.
Right. So let me share something else. Okay. Now, are you seeing the Excel spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay, so one of the items that this committee was also charged with, in addition to the definition of affordable housing, is to discuss how to use the affordable housing column on the allocation chart. So the allocation chart is, again, that test of where do our housing allocations come from when we have development projects come through. That's the first test that is taken when a residential development project comes forward. So if you recall, we have the rural west, we have other character areas, we have activity centers, we have, and then we have the, which we have not defined yet, is the affordable housing column. So we have by geography and then by a character or a policy area. So this is by policy area. So do I need to make this bigger on the screen?
I think that would help, yeah.
There we go. So I'm not seeing what you all see, so I see
It
my
hasn't
screen.
changed.
All right, I made it bigger.
Not yet.
Mm. Is that better? I did automatically optimize. Oops.
It's jumping all over now.
Okay, I think this is,
I think it's smaller. Now it's bigger. It's getting there.
okay, can you see that's as big as I can get it?
That's good.
We're good.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank
So
you.
basically, part of the recommendation from this committee or task force is to make a recommendation on how to utilize that column. So this was the recommendation that came from the Affordable Housing Working Group, if you recall from their last presentation to the task force. So I just pulled from there, and this was just a starting off discussion point. So what their recommendation of was to use the agreed upon affordable housing definition, which you've already agreed to, and it's already been in motion in prior meetings, and apply that to the affordable housing column of the ATFO allocation chart. And then how do we pull from that? So the idea is not for typical MIHU, LIHU, or DIHU projects. I mean, we have zoning code that requires in certain districts, 10%, 15%, 20%, depending on what the mix is. We have these new TOD areas that now require certain LIHU, which we have not really required before, but we have through our housing commission, you can switch out MIHU at a ratio for LIHU, but now we have requirements for LIHU and DIHU if you want to do certain things in our TOD zoning district. So not the base, but if you want to do something that's even more so, and we wouldn't be setting that standard would be set by the Housing and Community Development Board. So if a project has a meaningful amount of affordable housing units beyond the minimum zoning requirement for MIHUs, they may apply for these bonus allocations based on a review and approval by the Housing and Community Development Board to use the allocations from that column for their affordable, just for the affordable portion of the projects. And then the other recommendation, and this had UPP, I changed it to the SOUP now, approve projects be exempt from the SOUP in exchange for a bonus density and more meaningful affordable housing, so incentivize it even further. And then Housing and Community Development Board reviews, approves density bonus that is proportional to the number of affordable units proposed beyond the required number of MIHUs per the base zoning district. So basically just saying that we are recommending that the column be used in accordance with basically how the Affordable Housing Working Group recommended to how it would be used. So that is the proposed motion. It's a little complex, but that's just a starting point for you all to discuss on how to use this. Now, if you'd like to, I can show you what that column looks like again and pull up the chart to be helpful so you can see how many units we're talking. I believe it's 340 annually from that column, which is in addition to the by geography type columns in the allocations chart.
Yeah, why don't you pull that up,
Yep.
Linda, if you can? Yep.
Yes. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can find it easier that way. Alrighty. So this is the chart that is, I'm going to share my screen, that is adopted annually. The chart that goes along with the housing allocation map for the areas. So that way we know what geographies that we're working from. So here we go. Sorry, it's just a little slow pulling up. Okay. All right, can you see the chart?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so this is the chart that we would be referring to. That has the downtown Columbia, activity centers, other characters, rural west. So that's our 1,400 units per year that you are given out by the geographies. This would be for the policy area, which is affordable housing for purchase and rental that came out of the plan. And then this is the associated maps. This would not be based on geography. So any, it doesn't matter where you are by geography, it would be determined by how the recommendations are set forth and how council adopts then said recommendation on how to use this column and how to apply it. So the recommendation really puts it in the hands of the housing commission to make the determination of what projects would be deemed worthy to pull from that column for that bonus incentive for
So Linda,
projects.
that's what I heard most significantly from what you said earlier. Is this even in our purview if it's this housing commission that's calling the shots? Why do we
It's
even
in
need to
your
weigh in on this?
purview. Well, it's in your purview to make the recommendation on how to use that column. That's 100% in your purview, and that's what you're charged with.
Because
Making the
allocations are out though. Yeah.
Correct. So your purview is to make the recommendation on how to use that column. Their suggestion from the Affordable Housing Working Group, which also had Peter Engel, who is a member of the Housing Board, make the recommendations on how to use the column. And the housing board does make determinations for instance, if a particular project wants to do something different than the particular zoning, say, they want to change up the unit, how many units they're doing. Say the zoning district, is 10% MIHU. And they're doing 200 units or something like that. And they have to do 20 MIHU. And instead they're like, we don't want to do 20 MIHU. We want to come to the housing board and do LIHU instead. So they will come through and there's a formula based on that. And then the housing board and commission would say, okay, well, let's come up with the formula. Let's see what your formula that you're proposing and let's come to a compromise. And so that is in their purview to make some determinations on what that new number would be. So again, so it is in their purview then to make the determination on how to use, on how that project should be best served. So Lisa, you had a question?
Yeah, could we read the motion that's on the table? Because there was a lot that was read with regard to the Housing Commission's recommendations, some of which we've already voted on, like being exempt from SUP. And I wanted to just make it concise and clear, please.
Sure. Yeah, no, so let me go and share that now. Okay. So this is the motion.
Starting with using.
Yep, using the agreed upon affordable housing definition. So you've already done that. We're not asking that to be taken up again. But basically the gist of it is projects meaning development projects that are coming through with a meaningful amount of affordable housing units beyond the minimum zoning requirements may apply for these bonus allocations. That's kind of more of the description of what the column would be utilized for. And so you can take out what you don't like in this and make different recommendations. That's all entirely up to you. This was just what the Affordable Housing Working Group had in their recommendations to you all for your consideration. And I think Brent had a comment and then Dan.
Thank you. We watched this since the general plan, and affordable housing advocates really wanted to get a column in there, and they did, but they didn't seem to know exactly what they were asking for. They were looking for guidance further on. We're almost 2 years into the general plan. I'm not sure how these are being allocated currently, if at all. But one item of particular note is exempting affordable housing from the school surcharge component does create a double issue with adding additional density, which the school system needs to accommodate, and even less funding to accommodate it. But I would like to ask, we're looking at all of this like it's a clean slate. There's nothing in affordable housing, and we're trying to apply all these bonuses in there. But I'm not seeing what we presently have in APFO code for comparison. If you have something that's, let's say, exempting everything from school surcharges and exempting everything from housing unit allocations, is that already an APFO code? And are you changing it to be even more flexible or less flexible, or potentially no idea what the combined component is? Can you briefly go over what current exemptions exist for affordable housing so that we can relate them to these particular
So they're not exempt from surcharges currently, and this would not exempt them from the surcharge. And so what they would be, I think what the request was, and again, this was before SUP, is that they would be exempt. What they're asking to be exempt from would be the additional payment of the utilization premium payment.
And the surcharges, are they something a square foot or a reduced rate currently?
I believe they pay a reduced rate currently now, and I don't have those numbers in front of me. And in terms of for affordable housing projects, if you recall, they go through that new code process. They go through a code process that they can go through a council process to not have to go through the APFO requirements, much like Patuxent Commons did. And that's how these projects they don't have to go through the school adequacy requirement. And currently, right now, as you said, these are not being utilized until APFO is passed. So right now, this column is not being utilized because part of the charge for it to be utilized was for this committee to be stood up, which we are still in the time frame of this committee being stood up and passing what it needed to pass, which was 2 years after the general plan was adopted.
Thank you. And
Yeah.
I'm just saying in general, it would be much better for evaluation of this if we actually had a cross comparison chart of current versus what we're adding in there. So we have a very clear understanding what we're actually proposing, as opposed to throwing these on top of whatever there is and see what comes out in the wash.
Dan, do you had a question?
Yeah, I actually had two questions, but you guys might have answered my second one. The first question is the second part of this says projects with a meaningful amount. That is very subjective. Is meaningful defined anywhere? Who defines it? Is that the county council who defines it, or is it the housing commission, the developer? I mean, to me, I find it very interesting to put into a code something that's very subjective.
So again, let's think about this way. You all are just making recommendations to the council for consideration. You're not writing code. So this is just for them to make they will be the ones writing the code and making the law for this. So the recommendation coming from this body needs to be when do you all have a recommendation for how to use that housing column? Do you agree or not agree with the recommendation that came from the Affordable Housing Work Group on how to use a particular column? So meaningful is not defined.
Right, and I recognize we're doing recommendations, not writing code, but I'll speak for myself and say I have a issue of approving a recommendation that is very subjective in language. And so my second question, just to make sure I heard correctly, was for I'm just going to call it the second bulleted that says approved projects be exempt from SOUP. It sounded like that has already been approved, that affordable housing is exempt from SOUP.
No, so this.
No, we voted the opposite, actually.
No,
Yeah,
you're right.
that's right.
So approved projects are the approved projects that they have. So how this would read is that if the Housing and Community Development Board accept the project and approve a project, then they would, what the ask is that those approved projects would be exempt from the SOUP in exchange for they would get a bonus density and to have more meaningful affordable housing.
So this
you can take that out. So this was just the suggestion. So you can, again, massage this any way you want.
Understood. I'm just trying
yeah.
to understand. So
Mhm.
essentially what this is saying is if the Housing Commission approves a project, then if the recommendation and the county council passes this, then this is saying that those projects would be exempt from the SOUP, and then they would get a bonus density to add more housing into that
More
area.
affordable housing.
Right, but it's still more housing into that development that is exempt from the SOUP.
Because the idea is this would be for affordable housing, correct?
But
Okay.
since we've already specifically not exempted them from the SOUP, I'm having trouble understanding exactly how this works.
So
Maybe
you could take that out. And the reason I left it in is because in the original request, they had it exempt from school capacity testing. And we no longer have that as part of the requirement. So I replaced that language with this language because this is where we are now. So what you would do is just remove that then. If you still feel strongly you don't want even these types of projects that would be eligible to pull from the column to have that, then you would strike that.
But what does the second half of that bullet mean? More meaningful affordable housing in exchange for a bonus density and more meaningful affordable housing.
That's just a descriptor to have more. So the idea is that if you have more housing, they want to have more meaningful affordable housing. So again, just a description. It's just to add to the sentence. That's how it was written. So you can just copy in what was presented.
But I think this goes kind of to Brent's point. I'm not clear on exactly what this means and what they're asking for. There's a whole bunch of words that aren't defined. And I understand we're not writing code, but I'm
So
not
you can
sure.
remove them.
I'm not sure what we're voting on. I'm not even sure what the underlying meaning of this is, as opposed to the language itself. So is the meaning that we want to? They're asking to be exempt from the SOUP, and in exchange for being exempt from the SOUP, we're going to provide more density, a higher density, and they're going to do more affordable housing than is required.
Okay, so right. So I think the first thing to break down is, in order to use that column, the affordable housing column, the first thing is that column would be utilized only for projects that are above the base zoning allowance for MIHU
Allowance or requirement?
requirement. So if you're above the base requirement, you would pull from that column.
And what they're asking for then is, if they're going to provide.
So what's incentivizing that? So how do we incentivize projects to go above the base? No one's going to do this on their own, right? So how do you incentivize it? So the incentive then is, we got to give something in exchange for that. So you get some kind of bonus of some sort. So in order to get more affordable housing, you got to incentivize it. So the incentive would be to either exempt them from the SOUP, allow it. So now I would think too, now with the SOUP being, if that ends up being the recommendation, let's just say this, if that ends up being the recommendation that is adopted by county council and we apply that as opposed to the adequacy charts, more schools are open. I believe that the allocation charts will become more meaningful again. So then this could become an important column, and that developers would probably need to actually pull from columns. So then they will need those 340 units to make projects happen. So then in a project, let's say you have 100 units and you need 10 more units to finish off a project, those 10 units would maybe need to pull, because you've already tapped out, maybe say in your geography, you may need to pull 10 more units out of a policy. So that policy would be the affordable housing column. In order to get those 10 units, you would have to then go to the Housing Commission to say, I need 10 units, and here's how I'm going to make these affordable. The Housing Commission would have to approve those 10 units. So they would have to be some type of MIHU or better, LIHU or DIHU to pull that, and they would be the determining factor on that. But they need to be incentivized to do that, perhaps. And perhaps the incentive is, maybe it's a bonus, maybe it's not a bonus density, and maybe the bonuses or something is removing the SOUP for those additional 10 units. They don't pay that same surcharge for those additional 10 units. So just figuring out ways, how would you incentivize that? So I think you can maybe even have a cadre of incentives that you could offer up as part of your recommendation. So I believe that's what they're trying to get at with this. Does that make sense? And I think Paul had a question.
I guess not a question as much as an observation. Given what you just said, reading that second bullet, approved projects be exempt from SOUP in exchange for bonus density and more meaningful, and I'm going to assume meaningful means more voluminous affordable housing. I think we've already agreed that we don't want to go that way with SOUP. And I would suggest, in the interest of moving things forward, that we strike that bullet completely and consider the rest of it on its merits. um, with the understanding this is a motion that no one from this committee put forward, but rather what body is it that put this language forward?
It was called for in the HOCO by design general plan as a way to pull from the column. So the general plan called for it, and then the affordable housing work group, it was one of their recommendations to you on how to utilize that column for you all to make a recommendation on its utilization for the affordable housing column.
Well, I guess I can make a motion to amend this motion.
Well,
not knowing
no one's
anyone
made a
else
motion.
here.
So
I'm sorry?
actually, I need someone I can't make a motion. So
Okay.
someone has to make this motion. So that's why I'm just throwing it up there as words for you to consider and how you'd want to make this motion. But I would say a motion needs to be made on this because this is an important aspect of APFO and the allocation chart, or else it makes that column kind of like null and void if we don't have something to recommend to council for this.
Linda, would you mind answering just a few brief questions?
I will do
one
my
is-
best.
One is the equivalent of a regions test. Only a percentage of the allocations can go to any particular region. Does that still stand? And how
Not
would it
percentage,
apply
it
to
goes
this?
by exactly what the chart shows.
So we had prior language where you couldn't have 100% of the allocations going in one particular area. It had to be split out between the 5 planning areas of Department of Planning and Zoning.
But that's not how we allocate them. It's whatever the project is.
It would be very interesting to see how that
But we
folds
haven't,
into.
to be honest, I mean, it's been years. So, I mean, we have not even come close to even touching.
And that's the second item. Clearly, we have what, close to 2,300 allocations in the last chart that came out some weeks ago. Allocations have not been an issue either because of available land, interest rates, or whatever. But
Schools
this is
mostly
clearly
closed, me too,
geared
yeah.
toward very large projects coming into a congested area and where they can be applied. Can you just for the crowd and me, bonus density, is that reduced setbacks? Is that height? Is that all the above? What could one expect if you got a project adjacent to you that had bonus density?
It really just depends. I mean, you can't really answer that question because it really depends on where the project is, what the property is like. Bonus density could be one additional unit. It very much depends project by project.
And that's what I'm kind of just calling out in general. We have a inconsistent application of how it would be applied.
Well, we have a
and definitely
consistent
will get-
application on how it would be applied. What's the difference is projects. It depends on who's coming forward with the project. The application's the same. It's the properties and what someone wants to do with that are different.
So in general, a very large project could have a significant impact. And let's reverse this again. We're in the Adequate Public Facilities Ordinance Committee. So we got to make sure we have adequate public facilities to support whatever we're approving here. So how are we making sure we have adequate public facilities to support these changes?
Well, and I think I would just advocate for the housing advocates. They would say that affordable housing is an adequate public facility. And I think that's what they're trying to advocate for, is that we don't have enough affordable housing in Howard County. And so
That's circular, but yeah, I get it. But but I think Brent's point is fair. Let's say you're next to one of these large projects. I mean, it's probably in an existing building right now that's going to come down and be replaced with something else, and maybe they want 20% more units. So the question is, how is that accomplished? As Brent said, is it a reduction in setbacks? Is it
you can go
an
up.
increase? Yeah, right. Is it an increase in the height allowance? What is it? I mean, I I have reservations about this. I don't feel like as a committee taking this up with a half an hour and no prior discussion is
Well, it
even
was
fair.
introduced at multiple times by the Affordable Housing Work Group, and we did have it up and talking about, we just never really kind of went anywhere with it. So this is not new, to be honest. I mean, this was something that came up with multiple presentations from the Affordable Housing Work Group. And then after Mary had talked about, just it never was brought back up again by the committee.
We don't really have to do an all or nothing with this, though. I mean, we could talk about each thing, or we could, I think, did Paul move to remove the soup? Because if he did, I'll second that. Because I'll tell you what, I like the last bullet because it's pretty specific and makes a lot of sense to me, that you kind of base the density bonus on a proportional amount of extra units allowed based on how many more you're giving than is required. I think that that is like it. That's like the whole thing right there by itself is good enough, because, you know, the HOCO by design passed a new allocation column. It exists, it's there. We have to say maybe how they should use it. And the fact that they're allowed to use it is already a benefit. And you can't use it unless you're giving more. So that's the offset by definition. And I like this final bullet. I think it perfectly describes what the offset and the deal is. I think adding the soup is unnecessary and too much. The rate, as we discussed before, is already, you know, really lower. And so a proportionate increase is not that huge of an amount extra to charge because it's based on such a lower amount to begin with. I don't think it's going to make deals not happen. But giving more density, that's going to make deals happen. And I think I would vote for this last bullet, but I don't know that I'd vote for the others because, like Dan was saying, one is just too subjective, and the other is something I feel like in theory and in full feeling we've already voted on. Thank you.
So Lisa, then you're suggesting that we don't revisit the issue of relieving these projects of the requirement to pay the soup. That will continue, but you're wanting to grant the Housing and Community Development Board the authority to approve the density bonus proportional to the number of units proposed beyond the required number.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that last bullet. I just
Uh-huh.
don't. I just have a problem with the other ones. I'm
Do you
just
have a-
speaking in a debate comment now, where before I just had a question. So yeah,
Lisa, so the first bullet, I mean, that just is explaining what it is. That how they may
well,
apply.
not really.
For the
It's
column.
saying who can apply for them, and it's not.
Well, then how would you want to change that then? To
Well,
make
it's.
it...
I think the last bullet takes care of it. Like the people who can apply for them are the ones that are giving more than is required, and the amount of density bonus they're going to get is proportionately based on that higher amount that they're giving than is required. They pretty much say that at the end. I think that stands by itself and is good enough. The last bullet. I would literally just remove the rest. That's what I would vote on personally, but everyone has to decide what they want to do. I don't know if Paul made a formal motion to remove the soup bullet. Did you, Paul?
Well, there's no motion or anything because no one's even made a motion on this. This was just words I put up on the screen.
Right. I'm asking if Paul moved to take that.
I don't think you even
No,
need
and
to.
you
move the
didn't
rest?
because nobody ever
Sorry.
made a motion. So Lisa, why don't you make a motion?
Okay. I'm going to ignore an issue that is disturbing to me sometimes, the fact that there's no geography in any of this, because I like to see spread out stuff and geography actually having something in here, but you know, that's not how HOCO by design passed the allocation column. So I'm gonna.
They did, except for this one, right? This is by a policy.
Yeah, okay. All right, I move we accept bullet 3. Housing and Community Development Board reviews, approves density bonus that is proportional to the number of affordable units proposed beyond the required number of MIHU per the base zoning district as a way of utilizing the affordable housing allocation column.
I will second that.
As Linda types in, any further discussion? I think. Thank
Just
you.
one
Go ahead.
question.
Yeah, go, Paul. Yeah.
And the last line where it says MIHUs, should that be more generally all affordable housing? As because
I
MIHU
agree,
is
'cause
different
there's
from
LIHUs.
LIHU, right?
Yeah,
Right,
I
and
All
would
affordable
reword
housing
it.
encompasses all of them?
Yeah, since I'm making it, I'll go ahead and edit and say after MIHUs, I would put and or added LIHUs or DHUs.
Excuse me, Lisa, can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
Do you mind? I think actually we should say beyond the required zoning number. And actually, because I think, and then I think what you can say
Yeah,
as a.
no, that's good
okay.
because some LIHU and DHU are actually required now. Thank you.
Yeah,
So
required.
required zoning number of MIHU/LIHU/DHU. And see, it's all
What's
good because
DHU?
they put in there that any added is proportionately based on how much more you're doing. So even if it's a tiny bit more, it'll only be a tiny bit more bonus. So I like the way they worded this. Yeah, I like the way they worded this. And I think that
All right, I think we already said zoning. Okay. Okay.
okay, good. All right, cool. Yeah, all right, so I move that.
Okay.
Right, I will still second that.
Any other
Can I-
discussion?
Yeah, can I
Thanks.
ask a question?
Yeah, Aaron.
So,
Yeah.
so the density bonus, that would be a density bonus for non-affordable housing units. So it's essentially if you add more affordable housing, you're going to get more. No, that's not what this means.
Well, no, because of the wording of how this is how they're going to utilize that affordable housing allocation column, it means that, what can they draw from that column?
Right.
And so they're talking about having extra added
Right.
to the whole project that are affordable. And to the extent that they can add is based on the relative, how much more are they providing than they have to.
Right, so I think the example I would use is the same one that Linda used earlier. So you have a developer who goes in and he's gonna do 100 units and he's taken his allocations and he's taken, I don't know what the minimum is, 10%, 20%, whatever that have to be MIHUs. But he says, hey, you know what? I could make these units a little bit smaller and I could add 10 more units, but the only allocation he could pull from is the MIHUs. So what Linda was trying to say is that that's what they're trying to incentivize, is that if there's an opportunity where a developer has the option of making more units, that's a place they could pull from for their allocation. And that's what I think this is trying to do, is to say to the developers, hey, you need more allocations? We got this whole column over here that we're not using them all. And so you could add a few more units to your development if you
Okay.
use these over here, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So when you have a mixed project that has both, market rate and affordable housing, wouldn't you already be pulling from both buckets, or are you only pulling from? That's
No, you are pulling from both buckets, but if you have the option to increase the number of units and you can't get any more allocations from the other columns, there's the MIHU column that maybe you could pull from there. And what Linda was saying is they're trying to figure out a way to incentivize it because we don't have a lot of MIHU units. I mean, I've been in real estate a long time and I sell a lot of properties, and I can tell you, I think I've only seen one MIHU unit in new construction that I've ever showed to a client. There's just not a lot of it. This is not going to be,
Yeah.
This is not going to be a huge thing. It's just not. It's just not.
Aaron, if I can answer you real quick. Say that there's a project that is being held up and waiting because they don't have enough allocations. What I like about this is that it's saying to them, hey, look, if you don't have enough allocations and you need more, make them affordable ones, and then you won't have to wait. And that's where it's incentivizing providing more than the required amount of affordable, because you might be able to provide more affordable and then your project can proceed. That, yes, would likely have market and affordable together, yes. But in order to proceed and get more allocations that you need to proceed, you got to make them affordable, more than is required to be affordable.
So it's
To-
essentially, if the market rate allocations aren't there, but there are still affordable, they can add affordable, but yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
Now I get it. All right.
Yes.
Correct. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's a good explanation, Lisa.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks.
And that works very good, but where does the density bonus come into play in that particular scenario? Okay, you're pulling from this bin, you're pulling from that bin to make sure you have enough housing unit allocations. But what is the criterion to go, oh, by the way, I also get extra density?
But that's why I liked what they said specifically to that, Brent, was that how much more you get is going to be directly related in proportionality to how much more you're doing than you have to do.
Mhm.
How much more density or how much more housing unit allocations?
It's a number of units. It's a proportion, it's a percentage of the number of units.
Yeah, proportional to the
Yes.
number of affordable units proposed beyond the required number.
So we aren't answering the question of how much density could be allotted or in what proportion.
Well,
Right,
because
we're
that's
just
not
saying
for
it
us
has to
to
be
do. That's not what
related
we're
to-
trying to do
yeah.
here.
Well, I will go back to our charge is to provide adequate public facilities for all these units. So how are we accomplishing that here?
We're trying to help them figure out how to use a column that's never been available before. So that's what we're trying to do. And as far as any appropriate facilities, that's all taken into consideration, by this housing board, by the fact that we already have charts, by the fact that we've already done that. We don't have to go back and do all that again. It's already there. It's already built in there. We don't need to rebuild the wheel.
They have absolutely no obligation whatsoever to ensure adequate roads, schools, power.
They
Their-
still have
their
to
mission
follow
is-
all of
is
the
one
other
of the-
allocation stuff. They're not exempt from everything. We're not saying to them, this is carte blanche. Do whatever you want. You don't have to follow any of the other rules. They still have to follow all of the other rules. And not only that, but we took away, the option of them to be exempt from SOUP, which is going to help, which is going to hurt trying to have an affordable house when you've got to add, however much per square foot. I mean, I think this is kind of a big deal about something that's probably going to be very minor impact on the county overall.
The project still. Go ahead, Brent.
I totally agree. There's probably going to be very few that utilize this. However, I do see the density component as being pretty significant, if not well defined, to really double up on density on some very large projects that is unexpected. And once it's codified, all you can do is sunset it out. They don't cut anything once they go, oh, we just enabled the what?
So the reason why you have to incentivize this in the first place is because they don't make money on these units, okay? They don't make the same amount of money. It's kind of like when you buy a Ford Fiesta and you buy a Lincoln Navigator, they're going to make a whole lot more money on that Lincoln Navigator because of all the upgrades and all the charges, right? So it's like nobody really wants to build the Ford Fiesta because they don't make a whole lot of money on it. So there's not any incentive right now for builders to build these units because they don't make a whole lot of money on it. It's not like some builder is going to say, wow, I'm going to go out there and build all these MIHUs. He's not, because he's not going to make a lot of money on it. So there's no financial incentive for somebody to put a ton of density in somewhere of MIHUs because there's just not money in it. So, I don't think it's going to work out the way you think it's going to work out.
I'd like to call the vote.
Second.
Okay, okay. Chair, are you good with calling the vote?
I'm debating with myself because I understand Brent's point completely, and I'm trying to work the numbers in my own head. And I think we're talking past two separate issues, and they're getting conflated with one another, and I'm not clear on it. The reason is, let's say it's a 100-unit project, and it's a 20% requirement for MIHUs, so it's 20 units of affordable housing, but there's only 70 units of market rate allocations available. So the developer then can say, well, you know what? I'm going to do 30 and 70. Then I'm going to get additional density. I'm only required to do 20. I'm going to do 30. That's a 50% increase. This says that the Community Development Board reviews and approves a density bonus proportional to the number of affordable units beyond the required number. Okay, so it's a 50% increase above the required number. What does that do to the density bonus associated with this project? Now does the density go from they can do 100 units to they can do 110, but since you can only get 70 market rate units, now I can do 40 affordable?
Well, but it says proportional to the number of affordable units, not the percentage of the affordable units. I mean, it's a little wiggly, I hear you. But I tell you what we're dealing with right now is way more wiggly than what this is. I mean, they give millions to projects for promising tiny amounts more, and they turn around and don't even do them. They don't even have to refund money. So like the benefits that are being given out right now to do extra stuff are like extreme, and they're not even like enforced. So I got excited when I saw this because I felt like, hey, this actually sounds pretty responsible compared to what a lot of other things that are going on. But I know that there could be more guardrails. There could be a little stronger language, like, you know, what does proportional mean? At least it says proportional to the number of units, not the percentage of units. But Todd, yeah, if it were percentage duplication, that's kind of too much of a benefit. I would agree with that.
Yeah, I'm just wrestling with it because I don't understand it well enough, I guess, and I'm struggling with knowing how to vote because I'm not sure I understand it very well. And Laura, to your point on Fiestas versus Navigators, developers make fees on the moderate or on affordable housing in developers' fees. They don't make it on sale of the units or rental of the units. They make it on the fees that are embedded in the project, that are embedded in the financing in the project. So it's really hard to compare all of that. You can't. So I don't. We can call for a vote. I don't know where I am, and I'm not doing it to be difficult or problematic. I just don't know. I'm reluctant to vote no completely because I think that's almost an abdication. It's almost like, well, let's vote yes on something we think has the potential to be responsible and punt it to the council to actually write the language that would be incorporated in the code. I guess if I had to say anything, that's where I would be.
Yeah, but it's not the council. It's the housing affordable. We're just trying to support the Affordable Housing Commission and what they came up with this new column that we have. We're not, I don't know. It feels like we're making a mountain out of a molehill.
Well, Todd, I think you made an excellent example. It would be great for us to have a flow chart of what exists presently, what we're proposing, and what the combined result would be afterward. And you can say this is a minor issue, but I guarantee you if we skip over this, we'd have 100 people at the George Howard Building protesting within a day. So it is something that deserves our attention and lets people know, hey, what exactly are we enabling?
So where that being said, Brent, where are you?
I had the fortune or misfortune, depending how you look at it, of being on the original Housing Affordability Task Force, and I was the lone representative for the schools in there. So obviously I had a different stance on a lot of things, but one of the key things that came out of it, and it rolled into the general plan and it's rolling into this now years later, was you've seen me approach a lot of things formulaically. And that was the ask in the Housing Affordability Task Force. What is your ask? What is considered adequate? What is a sufficient percentage or number or type of affordable housing? How do we define our goal? And then how do we work through the formulas to get there? And you've probably heard me say this in testimony, but I'm saying it on record for APFO, is the answer is always there is no goal, just more. And it's very difficult planning, rationalizing, doing all these public policies based on unlimited ask. If we actually had a finite number, 15% of all houses, 20% of all houses, or 30% in this district and 40% in that district, that would be, okay, we have a goal. How do we get there? And what do we, what's our timeline? Right now, we're getting a series, we're trying to rationalize it, but what we're getting is a series of one-off, hey, how can I get more? How can I get more? How can I get more? And yes, their goal is to provide affordable housing, which ironically is rarely an APFO criteria, but that's okay. We can do that. We're Howard County, we're special. But again, what are we solving for? What is our level of adequacy and how do we get there? And right now, these are a series of proposals which increase numbers, but without a goal in mind. And I'm not opposed to their mission whatsoever. I'm just very concerned when that goal comes at the expense of other infrastructure items. Thank you.
No, thank you. Before we go to the vote, because we need to do that, but Dan or Jen, do you have any thoughts from the school side?
Go ahead, Dan, if you have anything.
I mean, I'm conflicted. I sort of along the lines that you are, Todd, that I'm not fully grasping the concept of this, and I understand what Laura is saying, but I've seen several times before in different aspects where this is going to be a minor thing, this is going to be a minor thing, and it's based off of a trend or something, and then all of a sudden, boop, it's not a minor thing. So I do have a little wariness there. But I also recognize the missing middle and affordable housing in Howard County and the need for that. So I'm currently conflicted at this. I mean, it's better taking away the soup, which was already voted on, but that doesn't resolve everything for me.
Anybody else? And we'll go to the vote. It has been called. All right, let's go.
Thank you all. I appreciate you all addressing this issue. Mr. Otterburn,
I'll vote yes.
Mr. Brown. Oh, he's not here. Okay. Mr. Casagrande,
No.
Mr. Crosley's not here, and Mr. Jomu and Essen are not here. Mr. Glykoff,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Lovelace,
No.
Mr. Lubley,
For the affordable, I'll vote yes.
Ms. Mallow,
Yes.
Ms. Markovitz,
I do recognize that it could be a little stronger guardrails on the language, but I think it's better than what we're doing now, and I vote yes.
Mr. Scherer,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
and the motion passes 8-2.
All right. The rest of the evening is to clean up as many of these backlot issues, unaddressed issues that have kind of been lingering back there. Brent, at the risk of running out of time, which I think we may, the majority, if not the overwhelming majority of those remaining items are yours. So I really want to defer to your judgment on what you think are the most compelling items that you have left that are unaddressed, because I want to address them in a manner that allows you to accomplish as much as possible with what you have hanging out there. So if you have a rank order, otherwise I'll just start going down Lisa's list, which has been incredibly helpful. Thank you, Lisa, in pulling that together. So I'll leave it at your discretion, Brent, on how you want to address
Greatly
them.
appreciate your concern about that. Unfortunately, these documents come out at 3:30 on a work day, so there isn't much time to do that or prioritize. So I would recommend we go from the top to the bottom.
Okay, so go
I
ahead.
have them on the
Lisa.
screen here.
Are we
Linda, yeah.
starting with number 69?
No, I'm starting here, just if you want to look on the right screen, on my screen. Number 20 is the first one that I have, 20, 21, and 22.
Oh, are they all highlighted in blue?
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Thanks.
Can you possibly enlarge the font?
Is that looking bigger?
Yeah, that's
Yes,
better.
thank you.
Okay. Mr. Glykoff, your hand is still raised. Do you mind lowering it just so I know when you do raise your hand? I can help out that way. Thank you.
All right. Let's try to make this quick in order of time, and the concepts are ones we've revisited. Number 20, student yield. So I'll go straight into, I make a motion that student yield impacts from new construction developed by DPZ must apply student yield from additional households in perpetuity rather than the measured impact from the first year of occupancy. So that effectively just says we are counting the number of kids coming in from new development, which is what APFO is all about. We are not trying to, I'm using my big words, mix up students coming from existing houses. Those are constantly going to occur. What we're dealing with is what happens when we add 10, 50, 1,000 to 200,000 units to Howard County. How do we mitigate it? Do I hear a second?
I don't understand. What's the ask?
The ask is to remove the Jeff Brownell factor, which is where he factors in existing households as increasing the enrollment of Howard County's public school system. The existing households do generate traffic throughout their lifetime on average, right now, 0.45 children per household. And they perpetually do that. What is done in prior APFO and school surcharge calculations is throw in existing households incoming enrollment and combine it with new construction in order to effectively reduce the school surcharge by a factor of 60%. It's not an accurate count, and it isn't addressing it. We're addressing the number of new households being added to Howard County and how do you mitigate it. And this would throw out a request for DPZ to start calculating appropriately the impact of adding children versus mixing that in with all children that are enrolled each year in the school system.
So the net of it is that you're asking to change Jeff's methodology in his calculations.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's worth about $28 million to the school system, depending which way you go on this vote.
So
year.
Dan has a question.
Yeah, can you be, just to clarify for everybody, Brent, as far as Jeff's basically projections and the use of them, are you talking about the school capacity chart, or in what factor specifically are you asking to do this?
I cringe a little at the word specifically because this could apply to multiple things. The newer version, pardon me if I don't have the acronym yet, of the feasibility study, the numbers that you get from DPZ would be affected by it. And just in general, go on.
Well, I don't want to mean to cut you off, but the reason I'm asking is school planning does get housing out or housing numbers and that kind of stuff from DPZ, but school planning utilizes our own information as well. It's not just that the county provides us a student yield and that's what's used. And so the reason I'm asking it this is at some point this would get very close in defining what the Board of Education has to do in their methodology.
I would be less concerned with that because that's a multi-factor problem that you're resolving through a variety of means. In relationship to calculating school surcharges, it is absolutely critical that this is well defined. And you can do the math right now. We consistently come up short on our school surcharges by a factor of 60%. And what do you know? That's exactly the amount that is altered by the Jeff Brownell calculation, where he factors in existing households' new enrollment with additional households' new enrollment.
Right, but again, that's why I was asking specifically, because the language on two parts is, one, when I asked a question, you were trying to answer it, but you immediately went to the feasibility study, or EFMP, which is not Jeff Brownell, that's the school system, the Board of Education's methodology. And the other difficulty that I would have with this is, as soon as if we're not specific, as soon as we start using this language that is used in both worlds, it's going to cause confusion on how come they're doing this, they're not doing the same thing, and the methodologies are different, and it's going to be for calls of either reverse this back or calls for Board of Education change your methodology. So I want to be very careful in this discussion.
So Dan, I am open to adjustment on this, but as you can tell, depending on the outcome of this, is probably the single most significant item that can change adequacy of schools in probably the next decade. This is a $200 million question.
Oh, come on.
Brett, is there some
to say it just applies to DPZ generated reports or methodology that would probably meet your criteria? You have many more factors you consider in school capacity charts. We're considering how this is going to affect the school surcharge fee, and in addition, the SUP UPP fees if they are enabled.
Is there a second to this motion? Last call.
Todd, do we have to do a second to the motion in order to have the discussion?
Yes.
Yes. Last call. Next one, Brent, 22.
Sorry, that'll take me a minute. That's going to really affect the school system. 22. Okay. Student yield. Howard County Public School System, or I make a motion, Howard County Public School System is to include report criteria in the what is now the follow-on to feasibility study, showing impacts of class size changes to the capacity utilization over a 10-year period. This is to include actual and forecast changes from school reevaluations. Yes, this is, to Dan's point, I can already pre-answer. It's a request of the school system to take this into consideration. It could also be a request to the state delegation to include it in the mandatory APFO report criteria, but effectively saying what, notifying the public what difference the year-to-year changes in class size have to do with capacity. I understand, we've been through the school lesson before, that they don't review it all the time. They do it when there's new construction and significant changes and comprehensive resurveys of the schools. And what do you know? We're going through a comprehensive resurvey of the schools right now. And most of the school calculations for utilization percentage are a factor of number of teaching stations divided by enrollment. So the request here is that we actually try to have a report which shows the other variable in this equation of class sizes.
So
As you
again,
know-
I mean, I think we get it. I understand where you're going with it, but again, I just want to make sure that I'm clear. Again, the ask is to change the methodology that, in this case, the Office of School Planning is using with respect to determining LRC. Is that right?
Now, this particular ask is a report, so we are aware of what the impacts are of increasing class sizes 10, 15, 20% over the years.
Is there a
The way
second?
I understand it is Brent's just looking for information to be required in the school capacity chart report.
Correct.
Oh,
Is there a second here? Again, last call. Next item. What is your next one? Is it 71, Linda?
No, it's 22.
22? Oh,
That
yeah,
was
you're jumping down
21.
to different sorting of, no.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the chart that I have here. So I'm just going in
I
number
see,
order.
I see.
Yep.
Yeah. So 22, Brent.
2020, 22, a motion that APFO capacity utilization test threshold limits should be aligned each fiscal year with the Howard County Public System K through 12 school capacity level published in the yearly feasibility chart. In other words, the 100% threshold standard. So what this particular one answers is, again, it's a factor of adjusting for the change in school capacities based on student teacher ratio changes. Based on the last vote, I'm not going to say this isn't necessary, but I'm going to withdraw it because it doesn't have the companion piece to it.
Next item, Linda, gone down your list.
This is Paul's exempt affordable housing, accessible housing, and minor subdivisions.
That's already been
Um,
withdrawn, I think.
okay.
Paul.
I've
Yeah.
withdrawn that previously.
Okay, perfect. Okay, yeah, for some reason it kept creeping back up. Okay, the next one. And this was yours, Todd. I think you took this one off too.
Yes, I did. It's gone.
Yeah, okay. Antoine, did you take all of these off too? The adequacy for roads?
We had already made recommendations for,
We did, but these specific ones, we just wanted to make sure Lisa and we did not have those scratched off.
yeah, you
Okay.
can scratch those off. Yeah.
Linda, if you
Yes.
look at item number 12 on my summary list for
Mm-hmm.
roads,
Yeah.
Antoine's 56 through 59 had a lot of specific detailed issues with regard to roads exemptions, but we had talked about that they would be covered in a general way if we wanted to look at motion 20, where
Oh, yep, thank you.
the definition in motion 20 that passed to include multimodal in the definition of the road test issues. If we actually added one sentence to that motion that the council could consider all modal levels road infrastructure, that would actually speak to the heart of Antoine's 56 through 59 without going through all of the
Thank you for that
detail.
reminder, Lisa. I appreciate that. Yeah, we
But-
talked about that
but
this
it-
afternoon.
Unless Antoine's revisiting his removal of 56 to 59, it's not relevant. Is that right?
Correct.
Correct. Yeah, no, we can go forward. That's unless someone else feels that we should go back to it. I'm fine with me.
Fine.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
What's next?
I think number 69 is next.
69 and
69.
70, we had already went through APA review cycles, but these were still on there.
Yeah, because we had
Yeah.
done that with Aaron, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. So withdraw them, Brent.
There were specifics in here. Remind me what our review cycle stance is now based on the voting.
The review cycle stance is now based on the voting that we do it every 3 years. So required after comprehensive zoning and then every 3 years. That was the
With that said, strike 69, but please keep 70, and I'll make it quick. A motion for APFO review cycle. A minimum of one APFO review criteria, i.e. roads, parks, police, funding, etc., is to be reviewed by committee each year. Obviously, there is too much for us to handle all these various topics in sufficient detail, and it would behoove us if we could actually concentrate on particular items on a more reoccurring basis than waiting once a decade.
Or once every 3 years.
And again, that's all of them lumped together. There's no ability to concentrate on a particular function.
Is there a second? Last call. Next item.
I think it's 71, which is Brent also.
Waiting for her to.
Yep.
present.
Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Yep.
This is the IG report.
Yes. A motion that IG provide an independent yearly report concurrent with DPZ state planning mandated report on the status of public infrastructure, changes in standards, and APFO areas for process improvement. So in other words, have IG contribute to the reporting. There is, it's very important that we actually determine what our level of adequacy is, and that level of adequacy is well defined and reported.
Is there a second? Last call. Next item.
That's a 73 through 75.
All right. '73 goes to the point of, we've used this as an example, the 60-40 split housing projects. I think we've explain this verbally in here, but there does need to be a formal reporting of how we're assessing fees for affordable housing versus market rate and combined and special projects. Right now, if you want to find out that and use it in any kind of adequacy calculations, some of that is not publicly available or has a process where it can't be publicly available. I will strike this because it has been partially covered, but it does deserve additional attention in the future.
So 73 is struck. 74.
Right. 74, a motion, housing unit allocation language in the general plan often repeats the theme of targeted development, while the present housing unit code contains multiple unlimited.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry. There we go.
Multiple unlimited exemptions. The motion is to either remove either the language of targeted in our general plan housing unit allocations or cap the number of units in exempting housing allocations. Let me repeat that in a plain language. This is saying we have a target of X number of houses per year, let's say 2,000. However, we have processes which allow unlimited exemptions, meaning that it's not a target. It's highly variable depending on what's inputted. The request is to remove the language of targeted from our housing unit allocations, or to the other extent, if we are actually targeting a particular number, to put caps in place in the housing unit allocations to make that the maximum of what we can produce. I would suspect most of the development minded would want to go with the leaner side of removing the targeted language, but it is misleading.
Linda, can you just clarify that target language? Is that indeed what's intended? That it's a target, but it can be exceeded?
Linda, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm thinking about what Brent wrote here.
And this has its origins back to Miss McLaughlin when she was head of the DPZ. There was actually language shifted by the matter of removing 2 words from code to enable this targeted language about 15 years ago. And it's remained in there. But if you look at it, it actually
And where
didn't
would
go
you
in front
be
of the council.
removing it from? The general plan? I guess that's what I'm unclear about.
From code, chapter
What's
16, APFO.
where specifically in the APFO code?
I don't have it on me. I can research it if it's germane to this. It's also oft repeated in Mr. Brano's slides, as we have a target of X number of units in Howard County.
I mean, you know, there's always going to be some, I mean, that's up to you all what you all want to say. I mean, I think we are always looking to, you know, we have a supply demand of what our housing allocations are and what we're looking to, you know, have projected as part of our development in HOCO by design. I think targeted is used as a general term. I'm not sure what the language.
Yeah, I can give you the quick language. Yay for items. Section 16.1102 has a specific language of targeting development. Sections 16.1104 and 1107 correspond to special affordable housing and moderate income housing exemptions, where annual targets are also named.
And
No,
let's put it in driving standards. It's like having a speed limit of 55 and also going, oh, by the way, an unlimited amount of vehicles can go over 55.
To at my cursory reading, Linda, because I think you're gonna give me a poke and noticing your expression. The way that the word targeted seems to be used looks more semantic, if you will, illustrative adjective rather than prescriptive adjective. So it goes both. I hear Brent's point, but it's not
It
as weight.
seems-
It's not.
So,
The word is not as weighted as the
Yeah.
as our
Yeah.
motion is being put
yeah,
out.
guys, hang out just 1 sec. Just 1 second. Before we take any more time on this, is there a second to the motion? Again, last call. All right, move on. Next.
And I see the great amusement on that, but that is critical in many zoning hearings, and that is brought up as a point of fact.
The next one's a rolling allocation, number 75.
Can you please present that on the screen?
Sorry.
I make a motion to reinitiate the removal of the rolling unused allocations to provide predictability.
I'll
We
second
had
that one.
this in place prior, it's sunsetted. It's time to re-enable it. Otherwise, we're going to run into problems with our predictability of number of units delivered per year.
I will second that one.
Mhm. Okay, discussion.
When did that sunset?
My understanding of how we've applied it in the past is for sunsetting is when it's been toward the end of a general plan cycle. And they've just said, instead of rolling it over, let's just wait for the next general plan update. So it hasn't really been a practice to sunset them on an annual or semi-annual basis. It's just happened periodically from time to sunset the allocations. Typically, they just roll over from year to year.
When we went to the new general plan, Linda,
Mhm.
we dropped all of those rollover allocations and we started over. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
That's correct.
So basically, we're a year into the starting over.
Yes.
Okay. So we don't have, 3,000 unused allocations that have accumulated now under the old master or general plan. We've started over. We're pulling from that 1,400, 1,700, whatever the number is. And that's what we've been doing for the last year under the new general plan.
Correct.
I agree, Todd. The issue is we aren't doing APFO for this year or that year. We're doing APFO as it applies to any year going forward until modified. And there is potential that this could grow into a issue in the upcoming years, depending on external market factors. And also, yes, this particular bill was sunsetted from the very moment it was voted in. There's potential anything that gets done again could have the same thing or not have a sunset. It's actually quite rare that we have sunset provisions in legislation in Howard County, but this particular one did. And I assume it was to appease some people. But regardless, another very critical factor, are we targeting a particular level of units per year indefinitely, or are we targeting a particular rate? If and when housing unit allocations become our primary method of regulating infrastructure, then this is going to be much more critical. And I'm also going to throw out the State Department of Planning considers APFO part of its smart growth plan in that it generally provisions growth where there are adequate resources. So our housing unit allocation chart maps provision out housing unit allocations across the county based on smart growth initiatives. And by continuing the rollover practice, we're undermining the geographical component of smart growth when we deal with APFO and housing unit allocations. I will leave it at that based on our voting record this evening, but hopefully that's enough to convince you to follow smart growth guidance and policy.
Question, is the intent of that to suggest that there's no carryover from general plan to general plan? Or from year to year?
Year to year.
That's how I took it.
Rollovers were always handled on a year-to-year basis.
Mhm.
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think if the SOUP passes through the county, that allocations are going to become more important as a planning tool. And I do think that even though it won't be as big a problem in the first years, as we go down the road, if they keep rolling over, you could get a regional inundation. And I think that planning equates to not just a total number of units you want to see in 10 years, but how to pace them and having a targeted goal every year and then having them keep rolling over and rolling over. I think that it can inundate things regionally too much. And we already had a huge change in the normal other columns of all these columns of allocations that are not being regionally analyzed. And I think that because of that, allocations need to be looked at as being able to be used as a planning tool in the future, especially if SOUP passes and you're not going to have any weights going on. That's why I support this one.
Yeah, I think, well, I don't want to jump in yet. Anybody else?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I
say.
would support a full, a full removal of the rolling allocation. But what about like a partial removal? Like if you don't use it, you get 50% gets to roll over, or 75% gets to roll over year to year.
Well, remember the one thing that I'm keeping in mind here in this discussion, because I get the point here. I think there's some merit to it. But the rollover, the unused allocations that roll over are allocated 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 for each of the next 3 years. They're not like they all dump into the next year. 1/3 of the unused goes into the next, 1/3 of the unused goes to 2 years out, 1/3 of the unused goes to 3 years out. So they could theoretically start to accumulate and as you're saying, Lisa, kind of swamp the system, which then becomes a real issue, Dan, for you all and for the school board. But if that starts to happen, then I think we probably have overcooked the fees in the soup, because that will mean that we're not getting the housing growth that we're hoping that we will, that we aspire to in the general plan. So I can kind of see both sides of this, and I guess I'm a little more with you, thinking that maybe they don't all roll over, maybe only a portion of them roll over. But I think the 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 strategy that happened under the last general plan does take care of some of that.
I'd like to make a motion to call for the vote.
So heard, let's go.
All right, Mr. Arterburn,
I'm going to vote no, provided that we're still 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 as it has been previously.
Mr. Casagrande,
Vote yes.
Mr. Lykoff,
I vote yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Lovelace,
Yes.
Mr. Lubley,
Yes.
Ms. Mallow,
No,
Ms. Markovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Scherer,
No.
Mr. Wright.
No.
All right, and the motion passes. Right, 6-4.
All right, next item, Linda, keep going.
Um, 76 through 85. Brent, these are all yours.
They're mainly on a theme. All right.
Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Well, this is also in the email you sent today. I mean, it's the same thing you sent in the email today.
That's correct.
Sorry, that is an emergency call if that's ringing. Motion, define and report mandated capital expenses to support community college, library, and other capital expenses per capita. I know that's awkward. Initiate a mitigation program. So this is basically a listing for the general public of what capital infrastructure projects require adequate public facilities, and start a mitigation program that covers these particular categories. It is very wide open, obviously open to the council defining it if they want to proceed. But it also depends on whether we have your support, whether community colleges and things like libraries are actually considered public infrastructure, which I believe they are because they are denoted as such multiple times throughout everything, including the county executive's state of the county. But for us tonight, that's what's up for grabs. I won't discuss it much further unless we get a second.
Brett, are you wanting to do these one at a time?
Yes, please.
Okay, so let's do, is it 86?
Well, I'm sorry.
Eight-
76 and I think we
Okay,
need to
all
know,
right,
do
I
we
see
have
it. I see it now. Yeah. It just rolled over, so I couldn't see the first digit. Is there a second on 76? Last call. Next item, 77. Same issue, right, Brent? It's just rec and parks.
Are we going to determine adequacy for recreation and parks? So the motion is to find and report mandated capital expenses to support per capita population increases. Initiate a mitigation program.
Any second? Next item, 78.
We don't support education, parks, hospitals. Motion, define and report county capital projects related to per capita growth. Initiate a mitigation program. This would be a hospital APFO test.
Which the county doesn't control. Is there a second?
I will say the county does contribute capital expenses to hospital capacity, so there is a rational nexus here.
Is there a second on 78? Next item.
Bridge improvement. Motion is to define and report county share of bridge improvements related with growth. Initiate a mitigation program. This was an item of great debate in the last APFO committee where to consider grade separated overpasses as part of their mitigation. At the moment, we're providing that at no cost to future development.
Any second on 79? Next item, 80.
80, I believe we have addressed on a separate vote. However, there is more detail that needs to be followed up on that. So I'll withdraw 80.
Okay.
And just verify, we did vote on the fire fee, correct?
We did.
Some of these bleed over. Judicial, our 200 million plus courthouse. That is public infrastructure we're paying on. The motion is define and report capital improvements to courthouse and sheriff's functions related with growth. Initiate a mitigation program.
Any second? Next item.
General county, the motion is to define and report mandated county capital projects related with per capita growth. Initiate a mitigation program.
Any second?
Can I
Next
ask a
item.
question? Can I ask
Go
a
ahead,
question?
Lord.
What do
Yep.
you mean by general county? I don't even know what that means.
That is from the county budget. General county is one of the largest areas of the budget, and it covers a significant amount of infrastructure items that we don't traditionally think of. We're very focused on schools and possibly fire and police. But if you go through the capital budget, anything that requires additional capital as we grow is fair for an APFO test. And this is just going whether this committee is willing to explore those items or not.
Okay, thanks for the explanation.
Any second on 82? Next item.
Maintenance. A motion that all APFO standards and mitigation are to include supporting infrastructure, to include fleet, central office, storage, and other capital expenditures related to normal use. We typically do not consider the support functions when dealing with APFO tests, and they're a significant amount of our infrastructure requirements.
Any second on 83? Next item, 84.
Police, define and report, I make a motion to define and report mandated county capital projects related with per capita growth, such as office, fleet, lab, and storage. Initiate a mitigation program. Believe it or not, the police also have capital expenses and capital expenses that grow as the population expands.
Second, anywhere? Next item.
I make a motion regarding road resurfacing sidewalk traffic. Define and report mandated capital projects related with per capita growth. Report to the IG county-funded preemption of developer capacity projects. And let me just say it in plain language. We need to have a running report of when the county is donating road improvements just prior to a development coming in, rather than accepting the mitigation from the developer.
Any second? Next item. Which is your
These are still
80.
Brent, yeah.
Yes. Yep, Brent, 86. Intersection capacity. No, I'm sorry, 88. My mistake.
88 and 89.
88,
A
89.
motion to implement a state jurisdiction APFO to manage road adequacy on state roads servicing the county. This is way outside our lane, but it is not to recommend it. We have a serious issue where state roads and county roads cross and they are not counted for adequacy, and also open for mitigation. And that pretty much means Route 1 is, well, the way it looks today, with a real live death count. I would recommend this as a follow-on to work with the state on how to deal with state road adequacy.
Is there a second? Next item.
State APFO. This is another more far-fetched one, which I doubt you'll vote based on your record right now, but I make a motion to implement APFO standards for state capital projects impacted by per capita and per square foot growth. In other words, what isn't being covered by Howard County's APFO needs to be covered by the state, and currently they have no mechanism.
Any second here? Next item.
94, I
90
think.
I have 92.
92.
Okay.
Let's see. This is one we've delved into almost every single meeting. I recommend that we direct the state delegation to require the results of mandatory fiscal year report on school surcharges to be included in the yearly, sorry, Dan, feasibility study or the follow-on to the feasibility study under its new name. This is already under mandated reports by the Department of Legislative Services. However, is very inhospitable to general public viewership, and it is critical for the calculation of our school surcharge fees and adequacy, as well as policing and watchdogging that our money is being spent to the right categories rather than slush funds. The report exists in an obscure area. I recommend that this is regularly published so that all parties have clear understanding of the financial impacts of the school surcharge fee.
I'll second that. It's just data.
Any discussion?
Brett, are you asking that this be published differently because it's already there, or can you help me understand?
In addition to, not differently. One, the audience is state delegates. The other is county residents and officials. We have no idea what it takes to get them to post what they are mandated to provide on the website. As a matter of fact, we should have a new one up today. I would hazard a guess if we went to the DLS website, it would not be present.
Brent, is this something that's published now in Rafi's department in finance? Where is it published
It is
now?
not. It is presented to the state delegation, Department of Library Services. It is not presented to the general public or anyone in the county. It's, how can I say, not too public document. You actually have to acquire it from out of county at the state level regarding county expenses.
This is a report from the county that they have to provide to the state that you want to require the Board of Education to put in their
republish.
Document.
Yes.
But is this something that the Board of Education or the school system is supposed to report? I mean, this is information in finance, right?
Well, Todd, we could easily do this in the Spending Affordability Committee.
No, I'm asking. I don't know the answer.
School surcharge fees are inherently related with education. You could also do it in the yearly budget. You could do it in other factors, but the problem that we're trying to resolve is there are very critical reports of our spending that are not readily available to the decision makers that have to make major decisions based on that. Look at this crew tonight. All of you should have a copy of that report in your inbox. We don't have it there, and it isn't up on our APFO website. And it's critical for calculating your school surcharge fees.
In the spirit of transparency, I support this.
I mean,
But
I
who are we-
support transparency, but I don't think the feasibility study or the EFMP now is the place for it.
Dan, I trust you. If you have a better, more appropriate location that is easily and readily and transparently accessible, I am up to modifying this. Otherwise, I would just leave it as it stands.
I guess my comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Aaron.
No, I was just wondering, Brent, could it just be that the motion be that the county posted on its website? I mean, I don't know why it has to get kind of run through the school system, is essentially, if I'm understanding your motion.
That is an option. It's less germane, but it definitely is an option. It's a hybrid. It's how much of the county money is being spent, county and development money, really DPZ collected, DLIP, not DPZ, is collected, and how it is distributed throughout the school system for capital expenses. So it blurs the line of multiple areas of responsibility. But it's critical.
It's an
our
account,
report card.
right? It's an account though that shows up on the county P&L or income statement, if you will. So I mean, it's information that's has to be accounted for in finance. It has to be either with Holly or with Rafiu in finance, right? Or budget.
Well, like I
But
said today,
I don't know how
I'm open to friendly amendments. Who could sponsor this? How do we make this transparent? Because it actually affects the core of your most largest motion out of this committee is all focused on school surcharges and multiplying it. This is the report that shows you the actual amounts expended and where they're expended. It is critical for all those calculations.
No, I get it. And I think I'm more with Aaron, and I think the language of this could be a little less hostile, and it would be recommend that the county post the school surcharge levels collected on an annual basis on its website. I mean, something as innocuous as that. It's a recommendation. It's not a require that it has to be done in a specific report. Just publish it.
I only
Every
find mild
motion
amusement.
is a
I agree with you.
recommendation, so.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's just there's a little bit of irony that literally the report, its title is state mandated report. It is a mandate. It is obligated, but we can do a friendlier spin for the county. The key is that we have it publicly available and people are making their decisions based on the information provided.
Brent,
Do
if
you
you're
have a-
saying it's provided to the delegation, I mean, can you just say something like, require that the report be posted on the county's website within 30 days of being presented to the state delegation, something like that? I mean, I think what you're saying is you want to make sure it gets posted, so you could put a timeline. So like once it's made public to the delegation, it needs to be published somewhere within 30 days.
That is very helpful. I would recommend a friendly rewrite of this based on that.
I continue to second that. Thank you, Aaron.
Can we restate the motion, please?
I think it's being worked as we speak.
Yeah, Linda's typing it right now.
Right, but for those people who can't see it, it'd be good if someone said it.
Yeah, I'm going
Well-
to, just finishing typing it up. I'm actually gonna even just share what I wrote. Okay. Require the results of the mandatory fiscal year report on school surcharges be posted on the county website once presented to the state delegation. Or do you want to say within so many days of the state delegation?
I think Aaron's point within 30 days is right. And actually, for what it's worth, and again, this is a recommendation for a friendly revision, and that is, I think the soup should be as well. Because basically we're piggybacking off of this. So with our recommendation to install the soup. So I think it makes sense to include not only the school surcharge be posted, but also any related soup charges be posted,
I
irrespective
would
of whether.
disagree on a lot, but I wholeheartedly support what you just said. That's
Yeah, I think because we're referencing this mandatory fiscal year report on school surcharges, and
Sure.
I think it goes beyond that. That's all. I think it should include the soup. That's all.
All right, how's that?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
And it's good to
Looks
say any
good.
related, because then it can exist in any event.
Yep.
Okay.
Anybody?
Laura, do you need it read?
Yeah, well, okay, so you took it off the screen before I had a chance to read it, so.
Oh, come on, Laura.
Require the results of mandatory. Oop, Oops, sorry. Thank you.
Call for anybody? I need a call.
I call for the vote.
I second that.
Linda?
Okay. All right, Mr. Arterburn,
Yes.
Mr. Casagrande,
Yes.
Mr. Glykoff,
Yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Lovelace,
Yes.
Mr. Lubley,
Yes.
Ms. Mallow,
Yes.
Ms. Markovitz,
Yes.
Mr. Scherer,
Yes.
Mr. Wright,
Yes.
unanimous.
We need to quit. We need to quit right now, right? All right. What's next? I'm sorry. We gotta keep this
94, I
moving.
think.
Yeah, 94. That's you, Brent.
Just a moment. We need it presented.
Okay. All right, sorry here, folks.
You're all right.
Can you see it? 94,
Now,
95, 96.
Yep.
mitigation fees. I make a motion that regional pre-K capacity requirements spanning multiple attendance areas needs to be accounted for within mitigation calculations and applied by elementary school region. Short version is don't cut out the kids when calculating what the expenses are to mitigate for growth in the Howard County school system. They would represent 1/14th, 15th, 16th of the mitigation capacity.
So Jen has her hand up.
Whose regional pre-K capacity requirements and what elementary school regions?
Whose will be Howard County Public School System. So the regional pre-K catchment
So-
areas that
So you're directing, your motion would be that the county council should direct the school system to, and the school board to determine to include regional pre-K capacity.
In the capacity chart?
this is related to fees. So in the calculation
Yeah.
of school surcharge fees, which presently do not account for pre-K expenditures, to start accounting for pre-K expenditures. And granted, yes, I am aware that 50% is supposed to be farmed out to private entities. That would have to be accounted for as well in there. But right now, the current school surcharge fee formula did not include pre-K capacity or providing pre-K capacity. So this is a outlier that needs to be covered.
But
So-
you want to. I'm sorry. Go, Jen. I'm sorry I interrupted.
So are you saying that you want the school board to be directed by the county council to change pre-K capacity calculations so that more fees can be levied?
This direction would be to the council itself. They're the ones who calculate and pass on.
I understand
Okay.
that. But so the calculations that you're asking to include pre-K come from the school system, yes?
Can
That's what-
come from
that's
the
what you're
school
intending.
system or could be extrapolated external of the school system. More accurately within the school system, you know what you're spending on leases, capital projects, land, partnerships and agreements and all that good stuff. Or you could just
first of
extrapolate
all,
from the
we're not
capital
leasing.
budget. I'm sorry?
First of all, we're not leasing any pre-K space. So that is irrelevant. I'll just say that if this were to pass and the county council tried to direct this, this would, once again, make it so that this calculation for soup fees is different than every other calculation that the school system uses. So the soup fees will be based on a different set of numbers than the feasibility study, than what we do for adjustment, anything like that. So that's, I won't be supporting it because my understanding is that what you're asking for is a new calculation. And for that new calculation, more than likely to come from HCPSS, which means from the Board of Ed, which again, the county council doesn't have the jurisdiction to direct. So I think making a recommendation of what they are to direct the school system to do is counter to what we should be doing.
Well, this doesn't particularly say the school system has to do anything. It just says the pre-K costs need to be accounted for in mitigation. That can be handled by finance, that can be handled by committee, that can be handled by Jeff Brownell. But ideally, it is something that we capture and apply because it is not in the current base school surcharge fee calculations. Is there a friendly suggestion how to route it away from the school system if they don't want to be part of the calculation process?
First, we
Before
need
we-
a second. We only have
Before
the
we go any
motion.
further,
We don't have a second.
that's us. I'm sorry, I had to step out for a second. That's exactly what I was going to say. But is there Laura? Is there a second on this to take this further?
I'm going to second it because I think it has to do with also including pre-K students in capacity. And that's something that we were discussing. It's something that Jeremy had also put forward something, maybe he retracted it, I don't know. But several people have been interested throughout our meetings to discuss how do we get pre-K in the capacity chart. And also, I just want to say that it's not like the county can't ask the school system for data, and they absolutely have the authority to do that. It's in the code in section 16 that the capacity chart has to contain certain things. So if the council ever decided to add more things, it's not like they just aren't allowed to do that. I mean, there could be an argument based on what it is, but the notion that nothing can be asked of them is just not accurate. I know that projecting pre-K enrollment is very difficult because not everyone's going to do it. They don't come in from another grade. So I understand it's very hard to project that, but butts in seats and actual kids who are in pre-K, it should be accounted for somehow. And I was confused in this motion, Brent, as to the difference between counting students in capacity versus what you're talking about, making up expenses of pre-K to relate to mitigation fees somehow. I think either way could work. And if there's an issue of the difficulty of calculating expenses, maybe you can figure out a way to calculate capacity instead. And that's why I'm seconding this, because I know a lot of people are interested in that. Thank you.
And you hit the nail on the head as far as this is a precursor. So there's multiple ways of addressing the pre-K issue, but the pre-K issue is how do we provide adequate facilities for pre-K, and mostly that's going to be through mitigation. However, I know there's zero appetite for it, but we could toss out a second motion, which basically puts a traditional test out there. We already have an elementary school regions test. It would not be too out of line to have the equivalent of a pre-K regional test based on net capacity across the region. Let's do the simpler, more agreeable one right now, which is saying just get the math right. If we can get beyond that, we could entertain others, but I'd like to see that we at least mitigate the additional capacity to pre-K that's coming in from planned growth.
Well, it seems to me there's two separate things. One is the school surcharge, which is right now at $8.15. That is by county mandate. County council can change that. They can reduce it. They can increase it. They can index it to whatever they want to index it to. The second is the SOUP. And the SOUP is based on a utilization rate that's calculated based on Office of School Planning and what is the utilization rate of preschool. Well, one issue is the number of heads that we're counting. The second is what's the local rated capacity of the preschool programs in the county. I don't know that we have any kind of data on that we're even at a point where we can make even an educated guess on that. But perhaps Dan or Jen has some more thoughts there. But with respect to APFO, if this is an APFO test, then it has to relate back to either the number of heads in preschool or it has to relate back to the number of heads and the number of seats. And I don't know how we get to either one of those numbers.
Yeah,
So we could do this in reverse and create a pre-K test. A pre-K test that deals with it via SOUP or pre-K under our traditional arrangement. But ultimately, the underlying school surcharge fee does not take this into effect. And that's what this motion is addressing, fixing the surcharge fee so that the SOUP is accurate when it is applied.
The surcharge fee is totally arbitrary. There's nothing scientific about it. It's a number that the county council selected in 2019 to start in 2020, to escalate up in 21, escalate up in 22, and then index to inflation. There's nothing magic about that number. So the county council has this fully within its control right now if they want to change the school surcharge level. The question specifically for us would be whether or not there's going to be a utilization table related to preschool that the SOUP would apply to. And I'm not at a point where I could support that. Maybe somebody else is, and I'll defer any additional of my thoughts to the rest of the group.
I agree that there's no formula that exists that this could be added to that is deriving school charge, which would then just automatically derive the SOUP. And so I was hoping to talk about adding pre-K to the capacity chart and how can that be done? I mean, at some point, I would think that needs to be there.
So if I could interject here, I have my hand raised. So I support in theory what Brent is saying. We see pre-K coming along. It's going to be required. Unfortunately, right now, it's not required. And there are a lot of difficulties that come along with that. Specifically in this, a couple of the difficulties I see are it's not required. So how do you actually, as Lisa said, how do you actually project? And I'm going to use that word specifically, and you're going to hear, if you haven't already heard Tim Rogers say this, there's a difference between estimating, predicting, and projecting. And with projecting, there's a methodology and there's numbers. With pre-K, it's not projecting right now. It's estimating. We may have, and we don't have the trend data. We don't have the surviving cohorts, but we also don't have a confidence in what families are going to do it because it's not mandated. It's family choice that's out there. The other difficulty that I see within this is how do we define what the requirements are per region? And yes, you're right, Brent. We do have an elementary region as part of the current APFO test, but there's also individual school tests along with that. And we don't have a definition or a defined standard for pre-K of every school will have. And we don't have a defined standard that every region will have. And part of that, again, is because pre-K is not required. And we've had this discussion, especially in some of our other processes, where people are talking about individual schools in pre-K. Well, it becomes a more of a difficult situation when you are talking about regions and you're potentially closing down or requiring funding through the SOUP when you're grabbing students from several different schools to fill up one school or require that percentage. So without having clear definitions, requirements, I have difficulty with this as well. Even though I do support the general idea that eventually will have to happen. I just don't know if we are there yet.
Well, Dan, you're dancing around whether we have a pre-K test. This was kind of a precursor, whether we're going to have pre-K calculated in the mitigation of our school surcharge. But Todd, to your question, is it arbitrary? I believe it's very arbitrary, but in the work sessions of 2018, when they were reviewing school surcharges, they did release a formula. They said it was from the county council's auditor's office. And what eventually came out in prior work sessions after the fact was that it actually came from Jeff Brano's office. And the entire formula for school surcharge originates and ends right there. And it has issues which need to be resolved. It wasn't cast in stone as the 10 Commandments. So this is definitely within the charge of our committee that we recognize that these things need to be captured in formula so that we can provide adequate public facilities. I would like to conclude the mitigation fee, which quite honestly is not that contentious. It's a fractional amount compared to the base for all the schools. And definitely we should entertain a practical pre-K test, which to Dan's point is not obligated currently, but we're not obligated to have libraries, colleges, roads. Oh, we kinda are. And much to the same blueprint is kinda obligating, even though it isn't codified, a pre-K capacity that's going to show up in our capital budget year after year. So that is what we're addressing, regardless of who the asker is from. So accurately counting for pre-K in mitigation fees, is that something that we have support of this committee?
Hi. This sounds like it would be actually better served for the next convening of APPO because there is not a stable enough databases for pre-K. That would be my comment.
Is
The
there a
only thing
call for
I'd
the
add
vote?
is that it's a real issue that's emerging on the horizon. And is there an incremental step that can be taken to acknowledge this issue by recommending that some measurement begin to build that database by a certain period of time? Forget for now the mitigation fee because it's not mandatory, but put in place a recommendation to collect the data so that when the time is right, folks are ready to go as opposed to waiting another 2, 3, 5 years.
So, Paul, that would be a different motion, right?
I suppose it would be, unless one's open to modifying this motion to say, yeah, it would be a totally different motion.
Right, so I had my hand up as well, and I think that I would ask Brent to alter this motion to say once pre-K becomes mandatory, then I would be more comfortable with this. I mean, the law that the CB 24 or 25, whatever it is that they just passed in Howard County about electrification. I mean, they passed this whole thing and then like addendum number 7 says, well, as soon as the federal government comes up with the rules, so it's like, what's the point? So I kind of feel like, yeah, I do think this is something that should be addressed. Maybe it'll need to be addressed before the next AVFO is convened, but it's not mandatory. So I mean, I think I could get behind it if it said once pre-K becomes mandatory. Thanks.
I have a question, Laura. When you say mandatory, do you mean mandatory to provide or mandatory for parents to implement, to do?
Mandatory that, so right now, pre-K is voluntary. You know, you don't have to send your kids. You have to
Yeah,
send
that's
your
what I
kids
meant,
to
like on whose
first grade,
end?
second grade. Yeah. So once
Okay.
it's a requirement that, you know, you have to send your kids.
Got it.
Okay, well then let's do this, right?
Got it. Thank you.
And correct me if I'm wrong, we have Board of Ed members here, but there's mandatory to attend, but there also is an obligation to have the facilities to attend. That is, I assume, a component of the blueprint which you're following. So
I can speak to that. So we are required to provide spaces for students who are considered tier 1, which is up to 300% of the poverty level at age 4. Now that is going to go to 600% of the poverty level, which would be tier 2, and that'll be a prorated rate. But it is unlikely that pre-K will ever be mandated attendance because there are other programs out there, and Blueprint requires that pre-K for both 3 and 4-year-olds we're supposed to have 50% private participation. Now, there's some problems with that. It may require Blueprint modification. I don't know about that. But in terms of holding this off until pre-K is mandated, it is already mandated to exist for a certain subset of students. It is not mandated attendance for anyone and is unlikely to be. So just clarifying that.
Thanks, Jen. That was really helpful.
and that would imply that the impact of this would be relatively small to start and could grow as needed if mandated pre-K raises its head. But there is a need to provide some capacity currently. More than 0.
I'd like to call for the vote. Would anybody second that?
Yeah, I will.
All right, Mr. Arterburn,
So we're voting on this as this stands right now. This
Yeah,
this
he
motion.
didn't change it. It's as it is.
Okay,
right.
that's fine. No.
Mr. Casagrande,
I'm going to abstain.
Mr. Glykoff,
Because I think the issue needs to be considered, I'm going to vote yes.
Mrs. Jones,
Well, I want to thank Ms. Mallow because she really helped me understand. So I'm going to say no because it's not mandated.
Mr. Lovelace,
Yes.
Mr. Lubley,
No.
Ms. Mallow,
No.
Ms. Markovitz,
I do prefer it relating to capacity because I think that's data that we can get easier, but I'm going to say yes.
Mr. Scherer,
Yeah, I'm also going to abstain.
and Mr. Wright.
As it is written, no.
All right, the motion does not pass.
So I don't know how many more we have. We have 10 minutes. And we won't be coming back to this because our next meeting is the 30th, and we'll be reviewing and voting on the final report. So that being the case, Brent, do you want take a look at what's left here?
13, 14, 15, 16. We have about 18 things that are left.
Wow.
And after we finish these with Brent, I am number 103 through number 106. 106 already I removed. I'm going to remove all of mine, 103, 104, 105 as well. And then some of the other ones here, the people aren't here. So 109, she's not here. Let's see, 120, he's not here. Some of these we've already actually discussed already. And some of these probably we don't need to discuss, especially ADU, because they just passed the ADU law. And so some of these regarding ADU are no longer even relevant. So there's 17 and I'm taking mine out. So that takes it down to 14. And there are 1, 2,
Well,
2 more where the people aren't here.
So Brent, which ones do you want? Where do you want to focus?
I'll be honest, this is ridiculous doing a last minute. We can only review these and all the rest drop off. That is a factor that hampered the last APFO committee, but we're on the record so people can see what was dropped off. We'll have to bring it up through the public process. Let's
Well,
go.
I'm dropping mine off because they already were covered otherwise, because you have to remember, we made a lot of these motions a long time ago. And so some of them aren't relevant anymore. And I'm perfectly comfortable dropping mine off because one of mine is ADU and they already passed a law about ADU. So it's not relevant anymore. And I don't want to
Thank you, Laura.
use up the
I
time on
dropped
this.
several tonight as well, so we're not alone.
In 26, I had withdrawn previously. I think.
Yeah, I felt with some of, I don't know what keeps, I apologize, 126, that's what I thought. Okay.
All right. So we're on number 95 is where we are right now. That's
Can you
Brent.
take 10 minutes to
Mitigation
read
fees,
that one?
school
Is it
surcharge
possible to come
mitigation
back on
fee.
the 30th and address some of the last ones and take up the report? And if there needs to be one more meeting, schedule one more meeting.
So we do have a final meeting scheduled for, and I believe Lisa sent out a meeting reminder. So we have the 30th, so tonight's the 16th, we have the 30th, and then we have August 13th for the final report.
Well, let's do what we can right now. We'll keep going down the list.
All right. 95, a motion. The school surcharge mitigation fee, CPI history, exemption description, exemption, a foregone revenue formula calculation must be published in the yearly, again, not feasibility study, but its equivalent. The basis point for the fee should be recalculated yearly to reflect the impact of adding capacity of an indefinite use permanent seat of a recurring use per average household added by the development on a 10-year rolling average. All right. Bottom line is saying we need to review the mitigation fees once every year based on the cost per seat of student.
When you say mitigation fee, I just want to make sure I'm clear, Brent. When you say school surcharge, thank you.
Can you change your motion to reflect what you're actually saying? Because when you make a motion and then change it, honestly, you lose me. Because you're saying one thing, but then you're saying another. So what is it?
I'm not saying one thing. I just read verbatim from the motion.
Right, and then you summarized it into something else. So you're not saying it's your summary, you're saying it's your this, and then Todd asked you about
Laura,
soup.
use
And
your
you said,
best
yeah, but
judgment.
that's
We're in
fair.
a time crunch. Do we have a second?
We want to be accurate.
I do too, desperately.
Brent just asked the right question. Is there a second here? Next item. 96, Brent?
96 regarding the state delegation, dedicated fund usage. Require a cap on funds to be transferred from capital expansion projects to operational capital expenses. Short version is reduce the slush funding of school surcharge fees for operational expenses or operational maintenance.
But they're not allowed to be used that way now. I don't understand.
There are exemptions in there, and they are being used. And if everyone were to read the report, they would see many examples of which.
So the motion is that school surcharge fees should only be used for capital improvements or capital maintenance, not operational funding.
Correct. And it's not
Which
that
is
I
my-
want to limit operational funding, as I don't want
No.
it supplanted incorrectly.
No, I understand, but it's my understanding that the enabling legislation for the creation of the school surcharge specifically prohibited the use of those funds for anything but, actually, I think originally it was for additional seats, additional capacity, and now it's for capital maintenance as well. But maybe Dan or Jen knows more accurately what the current situation is.
Dan, you'll have to take that one.
Is that the surcharge is divided and spent out as Dr. Sun and her team identify. I'm not aware specifically of, from the school system side at least, of it going to operational aspects. I mean, the maintenance or deferred maintenance aspect is still capital, not operational.
Right. So is there a second on this motion?
Based
There
that
is
we've addressed this somewhat, I'll withdraw.
No second. Number 97, or what, is that right? 97?
97, make a motion to create a new dedicated fund alongside the Housing Opportunities Trust Fund. The foregone infrastructure fund is to be created and managed by the council and Howard County Public School System with IG oversight. The entity shall report yearly on cumulative foregone expenses from underestimated surcharge and will assess an additional public developments surcharge to offset lost revenues from APFO exemptions. Long story short, as we build affordable housing and we have exemptions, we have shortcomings. There's nothing saying we can't have a grant for adequate schools alongside affordable housing. And if one were to exist, this would be the mechanism to create it and monitor it.
Who funds this, Brent? And how's it collected?
Well, that's a good point. Right now, it would be an unfunded mandate. It would be something that should be applied to in grants to have adequate public infrastructure surrounding the affordable housing facilities that are implemented in Howard County.
But the school surcharge fee is the school surcharge fee. That's done. The soup is the soup. That's done. So who funds this?
This would to be receive and or collect any revenues from grants or proposals for affordable housing that relate to the infrastructure that supports it. I see your head nodding. We're close on time. The concept is out there. Housing Opportunities Trust Fund is a slush fund of sorts, which has had tens of millions of dollars funded into it. There's nothing saying it can't have a companion. And quite frankly, all the affordable housing advocates who have spoke with me over and over on this topic say, why can't we have good schools and affordable housing? Well, this is a mechanism to help enable it. Vote accordingly.
Is there a second? All right, so no second on that. It's 8:30. I'm not going to take anyone's additional time. We'll do what we can to finish up then on the 30th. I know, Linda, what's the status of distributing your draft? Are you doing that before you leave?
Yep, I'll send that out after this meeting.
And when do you look for comments back from committee members?
So, okay, so full disclosure, the report is rough, so it's going to be polished up. I just want you all to see where we are headed. I will send out the 2016 report with it in comparison so you can see where it's headed. So I'm going to have staff work on it while I'm away to add the appendices, polish it up, and do some other things to it. And then I will not have time, though, to add what we've done tonight to the report, to be honest with you. So then just kind of, I want just feedback on where it's headed. If you think I've missed key points that you would like to have made in the report. So that's what I'm looking for. High level overview, key points that need to be made in the report that you think have been missed, and general direction of where the report's going.
And
So if you can have comments back to me by I think if you can give them back to me the 28th, I'm not going to have any time to work on them. I'll try to turn things around for the 30th, so we can just go over what those comments are on the 30th.
Okay, that's fine. Jeremy and I both worked up on the executive summary. Linda's kind of picked and chosen from those two suggestions to incorporate and basically to coordinate the executive summary with the body of the report, which is where the majority of her time's been spent. So when you get it, you'll have a couple of weeks, but comments back to Linda by the 28th, and then we'll spend hopefully the first half then of the 30th going through our final issues, and the second half doing kind of a broader overview of where the final report stands. And then I guess then we'll be looking for a final report and vote on the 13th of August, then, what I'm hearing you say, Linda, right?
Yes, that's what would be best. And then if we could go ahead after that point in time and forward it then after that to the county executive and county council, if you're ready to do so. But it has to be forwarded by the 24th.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Have a good
additional request.
Todd, can I make a suggestion before we sign off here?
Yes, yeah.
So the email that Jeffrey sent this afternoon, if you guys didn't have a chance to look at it, I mean, I went through and I looked all of these remaining motions, and a lot of them we've covered already. So if everybody who has remaining motions could look at the email that Jeffrey sent this afternoon at 3:39 p.m. And if you want to change your motion or remove your motion, please give that some thought. Let Todd know and let us know so that we can in advance remove some of these things if they need to be removed, because some of them we've already discussed or they're not relevant anymore. I would just ask people to take some of their time to do that so we don't have to take the committee time to do that.
All right. And Linda, you are out now for 10 days, right?
Yeah, I will be back on the
Yep.
28th.
Ooh, have
Okay.
fun.
Yeah, thank you. All right, and so you all should be having that report in your inboxes any second now.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Motion to
All right.
adjourn.
Motion?
I
Good night.
second it. I
Second?
second it.
Yes, okay. Good night.
Thank you, Jeff.
Good night.
Bye,
Bye,
everyone.
good night.
Night.